I have been retaining for 87 days now and had an amazing last few streaks. Although I'm not as active in the subreddit, I really love hearing about people's personal experience, and I will only post about stuff that has personal rewarding experience for myself with SR to add some value. It's my fourth longest streak, and my longest was about 183 days, which was almost some of the best days of my life. It's like when I wasn't retaining, I don't as such remember the vibe or emotions associated with it. I think what this individual was alluding to here is this idea of its effects on memory. And when you're losing some of those very valuable, nourishing nutrients and minerals and vitamins, especially things like zinc, your neurochemistry isn't as sharp, isn't as quick. Your cognition is a little bit slow and sluggish and lethargic. And it feels almost like you have a supercharged memory. Some of you may remember Swami Vivekananda, who was a very famous Indian sage. And one of the amazing things, one of his kind of party tricks, colloquial term, that he would use to kind of fascinate Western scientists who would come to visit him, is I think they went to his personal library. They would bring out like a book. They would turn to a random page, like page 127, and they would ask him to recite it. And he could just recite it word for word. His memory was almost photographic. And he was a keen practitioner of brahmacharya, which is it's not as accurate. I mean, brahmacharya means to walk the path of God or walk the path to God. But there is some translation in the SR community that brahmacharya means SR. I've got to know about sexual transmutation in the very first of my journey and have put all that I've learned into practice. I will list a few for people who want to try it out for themselves. So this is kind of his personal list here on what he believes has been the most valuable practices in order to transmute and fundamentally practice this. Number one, surprise, surprise, deep breathing, keeping it in your lungs for around 7 seconds. I say go even further than that. In my Patreon, I've got videos where you can hold your breath for up to 3 minutes. And what's really interesting is a lot of people, some of my videographers who come with me to film, they say I could never do that. You'd be surprised how long, if I took one of yourselves, if you do the guided video actually, even if you have very, very poor lung capacity, I could take the average person and I could make them hold their breath for over 2 minutes first try. Really, really easily. If you don't believe me, try it out. Intense visualization, aka the way to connect with the infinite intelligence. I think that there's some substance to this. It's not something perhaps I expound upon, but this is a system to an end, right? It's a means to an end. It's a system to an outcome or a goal. A lot of people, when they say, Joseph, I want to practice SR, what for? One of my clients actually messaged me about 2 weeks ago, and he was saying, I'm on a 150-day streak, and I'm feeling good about myself. And I just said to him, just out of curiosity, I was like, what for? What is the purpose behind this? Not discrediting him, but the purpose, the point of the question was trying to get him to think about the greater picture. This is a system to a particular outcome. And he came back to me and he had a fairly comprehensive answer. He said, well, first and foremost, I see it as a means of self-respect. I see it as a means to not be reactive and to keep my frame, especially in my relationship. He has a girlfriend. And ultimately, to enhance his creative capabilities. He's what would you say, semi-professional artist? Is that something that you can say? He paints watercolors, and he kind of sells it as a side hustle. And it was to facilitate that. The very creative element to create life can also be used to facilitate other creative exploits. So with that in mind, what for? If you're watching this, what for? He who does not have a why, the how isn't going to make itself. That's Nietzsche for you. It's if you have an overarching aim and a goal that is very clear and concise and measurable and specific in your mind, you'll find that the how takes care of itself. I have individuals who are perhaps in a, I think comfort sometimes, not sometimes, but most of the time it can be kind of a slow knife between the ribs, because I find that people who have more of a means to practice this, let's say they're in debt, let's say they're trying to make ends meet, they are more highly motivated through the prospect of loss than they are gain. Therefore, something like SR becomes very, very easy. I have to commit to this practice, otherwise I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my wife, I'm going to lose access to my children, and that can be a very, very compelling, very, very compelling goal. And then the how, the SR, it takes care of itself. It really does. So I think there's something to be merited and something to kind of sit and meditate and really, really pass out and actualize this overarching why. Gym or strength training, try both heavy lifting and 30 minutes of cardio. I think that's a pretty amenable compromise between the two. Cardio is maybe something that I need to do a little bit more work on personally. Socialize with people, yes, it does help, as I'm more of an introvert. There's definitely something to this. I find that individuals who perhaps are introverted, like myself, who find it, what would you say, emotionally exhausting to socialize with people for long periods of time, actually will struggle more often than not with this particular practice. It is a form of transmutation. If you speak to people regularly as part of your occupation, I actually think it's a very, very powerful transmutative aspect, especially if maybe your job involves something like sales, where you have to be very charismatic, and it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It's this is a act of transmutation right here. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking this very creative and primal energy within myself, and I'm trying to funnel it and transmute it in a way that is hopefully captivating to you as a listener. In the same way, when you're in a social situation, I think there's an element of play and whimsy that you can really extrapolate from what would just be a very boring, dull, mundane conversation, and actually kind of take the reins and go, let me make this conversation almost like a piece of art. I know that might sound juvenile, but it has a tangible effect on people. They want to interact with you more. It's really interesting when you're on form. I don't know if this term is familiar to you. I think it might be this is a Western audience, or a Western term, but particularly in sports. Like, if you're on good social form, like I remember going to a party. It was for a friend's housewarming, like a flat warming with one of his girlfriends. And I knew when I was going to go there, because I only knew him and his girlfriend and maybe one or two other people. I was going to meet loads of other people that I'd never met before. And it was one of those really interesting opportunities where I just went in. If I didn't know somebody, I would go straight up to them, introduce myself, try and find a bit of rapport with the individual. What do you do for work? And then try and add something funny or whimsical or play. And it really, it's interesting. It really doesn't matter what you say. It really doesn't matter what you say. It's more how you say it. It's your tone. It's your inflection. It's the way you kind of play with the word choice and the intonations in what you say. And you charge your words with energy when they're coming out of your mouth. And I was just on slick form that night. I must have got about 4 or 5 different numbers of men and women, guys that just wanted to hang out. And I went surfing with a guy, and then I went mushroom foraging with another guy, like the consecutive week. And when you meet up with those individuals, that they want to. It's almost like you you almost hook them on you as a substance, like a drug, and they come back and they want to go, I enjoy the energetic exchange and the feeling that individual imparted on me when we had that social interaction. Therefore, I want more of that feeling. I want more of that drug. I want more of that substance. You can almost be like a social drug in that way. I think that's a good way to kind of describe it. Read extensively and replace it with replace doom scrolling with it. I'm not a native English speaker, but I can speak it well because of my habit of reading. Of course, this is par for the course. You know, I'm an extensive reader. This is going to be a very difficult library to take me with me to Thailand. But I think certainly as a minimum, you can have a Kindle on your phone or on a Kindle. I always find myself reading up to 30 to an hour, 30 minutes to an hour of reading before bed, pretty much every day. I'm reading My Big Toe by Thompson. I forget his first name, but really, really interesting gentleman who was one of the associates with the Gateway Tapes gentleman, Robert Monroe. So the CIA hired him to do remote viewing with the CIA operatives. Very, very fascinating stuff. And, something that I'm going to look into and see if I can take some practicality with it, experiment with myself and give you something. But one of the things I would say, if you really struggle with reading, because I wasn't a keen reader until I was probably about 22 or 23, so it's never too late, is the reason I realized why I wasn't reading younger than that was just because I didn't find the things that I like to read, So read around. You might find that you are really avid, you have a real interest for history or biographies or fiction or non-fiction, like myself. When I found my love for non-fiction particularly, reading became easy. Reading became almost... It certainly became a facilitator, a catalyst for my own self-improvement, but it was really just, reading was a means for me to explore my own internal fascination with what I could potentially achieve and with the world. And, if you're not fascinated by the world, then, you're probably a nihilist and not looking good for you. Kegel exercises. I have sex almost 2 to 3 times a week with my girl and no ejaculation. Some may call it energy depleting, but for me it was something that really puts my urges in check. I have gotten used to it, so it's not as difficult before I explore. Yeah, English, sorry, isn't really your native language, my friend. Kegels really do help make sex more enjoyable. These are literally muscles you can condition for good sex. Yeah, there's a really interesting resource that I've referenced 1 or 2 more times. It's called Mindgasm. It's a really interesting app that you can download onto your phone, and it kind of teaches you how to get control over. There's 3 different muscles in the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor typically is one big muscle, but there's 3 specific muscles that you can kind of get control on. It's kind of that mind-muscle connection, and it's really, really interesting what you can do with a partner. This is really tantra, what we're talking about, white tantra, karezza. I've referenced these particular terms many, many times before, but one of the comments I've been getting more frequently on some of the posts that I make is, Joseph, what if I have a partner? What if I have a wife? Does this mean that I'm not allowed to have sex anymore? And I always say, well, just because you have sex doesn't mean that you need to ejaculate. Those are 2 distinct processes, and it doesn't even mean that you can't achieve orgasm. So even orgasm and ejaculation are 2 distinct processes. You can have an orgasm without ejaculating. So they're not mutually exclusive, those two processes, and you can get control over them if you get control over the muscles in your pelvic floor. It does take time. Fortunately, when I learned about this, I was with my ex-girlfriend for 5 years, and it was challenging. It's really, really difficult because you're trying to maybe unlearn a particular way of having sex. So most people have what I call traditional Western intercourse, or actually no, it's not even traditional. I would call it modern Western intercourse. Traditional Western intercourse is intercourse without contraception, which would typically, baby is born. Hopefully your mum and dad had the chat with you. But modern Western intercourse is with contraception and always with ejaculation at the end of that particular process. But as we start to move into this new age and people hopefully are becoming a little bit more conscious of the sexual energies, I'm the firm believer that people like Mantak Chia, maybe even myself to an extent, are individuals who are starting to lay the breadcrumbs or the foundation. I mean, certainly Mantak Chia is more of a pioneer than I probably ever will be in respects to a new way of having sex. Well, it's not even a new way; it's an old way. It's a very old way of having intercourse, which is Tantra. And in that way, you're going to realize that much like women don't achieve orgasm after, during every single sexual interaction, neither will men. But hopefully it gets to the point where you can both achieve the climax of orgasm, but without the repercussions of losing your sexual energy through ejaculation. If you're really cynical about this idea, I understand. When I first heard about it, I thought it was stupid. Then I read The Multi-Orgasmic Man by Mantak Chia. Then I experienced it for myself. It's like these things are controlled by muscles, like anything else. When you, if any of you are weightlifters, and again are cynical of what I'm saying, it's like if you've ever taken a long break from the gym, maybe you got injured, maybe you were traveling for 6 months or something like that, and then you go back to the gym, and even something as simple as maybe picking up a dumbbell to do a bicep curl, it feels very strange. Like it feels weird and kind of alien and uncomfortable and unfamiliar compared to if you were going to the gym for 5, 6, 7 days a week and you were picking up the weights and doing your workout. There's almost like your muscles and your nervous system, it has like a real familiarity. It has an expectation of the movement that you want it to do. And it is no different. It is no different from the muscles in the pelvic floor. If you've only been training your muscles to work one particular way in the pelvic floor, it will always follow that pattern. If you were trying to train it to do something different, it's going to be weird. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be unfamiliar at first. But the more and more you train those muscles to become familiar with new pathways, they lead to new experiences. And some of those experiences will blow, pardon the pun, and pause, by the way, your understanding of how you can have a sexual energetic exchange with a woman. I mean, you will experience pleasure and joy to a height that you wouldn't even conceivably believe is possible before. Almost spiritual. In fact, it is spiritual, some of the experiences that you have. But now the one that has probably had the most crazy effect on me is mixed martial arts training as my new primary hobby. I did 1 week of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing at my mixed martial arts gym, and it feels like I'm high on drugs. I saw guys who were truly experienced pro fighters getting tired way before myself. My boxing and wrestling coach, who had both trained over 600 fights, said I had the focus and energy of some of the best fighters that they have. I legit got special treatment because of it, and people see me as a prospect. Like, I just trained for a week. Because of how it has made me feel, I transmute it into my work, and so far I can't even explain how insanely productive my weeks have been. I just love it. Try it out, fellas. You might find it life-changing. Now, the only chink in my armor, and it is a significant chink, is I don't do any, currently, mixed martial arts. I used to do judo and a little bit of Muay Thai about 2 to 3 years ago, and that was amazing. Unfortunately, at the moment, I've just had too many injuries. I have a wrist injury and I have a lower back injury. I actually have an L3, L4 disc bulge at the moment that I'm healing at the moment. But I'm hoping when I move to the east to pick up something like Muay Thai and doing it a little bit more comprehensively, maybe doing a little bit less weights and trying to work on more function, maybe calisthenics, and trying to become a little bit more of an all-round athlete as opposed to just a guy who lifts weights, plays football, and does rock climbing now and again. Anyway, gentlemen, theories, facts, you let me know, and we'll speak soon.